focus. All right, cool.
Well, yeah, here we are. So it's happening.
Glad, honored, excited, a little nervous to be on the JAlves show. This is exciting.
Well, we appreciate you coming on here. I mean, one of the reasons I reached out to you first was when we did the first kind of pilot episode. We got a lot of feedback from people that they really enjoyed that part of the conversation where we talked a little bit about his connection to kind of this Centralia founding era.
Yeah.
And so I thought, man, who better to get on here than somebody who wrote the book, you know? So, um, yeah. So why don't we start there, and just kind of tell me a little bit about. Well, let's start with this. So, how did getting the book? What possessed you to do that?
Well, in 2017, 2018, George Washington, not the president, but the founder of Centralia, it was his 200th birthday. And some of us came together and said we should really have some sort of observance in Centralia. And so, as part of that, I wanted to read everything that had been written about him. So, I'll find all the books. So I started looking, and there hadn't been a book written about him. There actually had been one book, and it was a children's book written in the 1990s. And it's a really cute, sweet little book that we made sure we got copies of. So it's at Book and Brush and all around now. So this was the book on George Washington, a kid's book. And so there actually had been a history book of Centralia written a long time ago, back in the 30s or 40s, that had a little chapter on George, but it was kind of out of print. It was this 300-page book, and there were 30 pages on George. So I started kind of retyping that into something that I could then print out for people, and it just sort of grew into a book. I had a great co-author, Carrie Searle, who came on board, and we were retyping that and just kind of learned more and more and more. And it's just such a great story, an American story about this person who sort of saw the worst and the best of America and created something for everybody out of it. So that's how the book came about, is no one had written it and it needed to be written. So I did it.
Yeah, yeah, and a little bit of your background as well. You are a writer, but more of a journalist than an author. Is that
Yeah.
kind of your background, or?
Yeah, so grew up here in Chehalis, worked in Centralia at the Chronicle newspaper for a number of years. And so, yeah, I have a lot of experience in kind of small town journalism. And that's sort of how this initially came about. Was I was writing a column at the library in Centralia and happened to walk by, and they have this cool stone history of George Washington. I walked by, this was probably, 20 years ago, and I saw that I had just missed the 100th anniversary of his death by just a few weeks. Like, oh, that would have been such a cool column, 100
Yeah.
years since this great pioneer passed away, and I didn't know much about him at that time. So I said, oh, what's the next kind of cool anniversary that I can look at? And it was 10 or 15 years later for the 200th anniversary of his birth. I'm like, okay, I got to remember in 20 years to write that column. So every time I'd go to the library, I'd walk by, I'm like, okay, 15 years until then. Okay, 8 years until then. So a year or two before that, okay, this is coming. And I wrote a column for the newspaper saying, hey, Centralia, your incredible founder, 200th birthday's coming up. You guys should do something really cool for it. And I get feedback saying, yeah, someone should do something cool. And as it got closer, that was kind of, I'd write more column. Hey, you guys should do something. Everyone said, yeah, somebody should do something. So I wrote a column saying, hey, this is the 200th birthday. I'm going to be at the library on, Tuesday evening at 5:00. Anyone who wants to do something should show up. And a bunch of people showed up. We had 20 or 30 people in the room, which was really cool. And everyone was so excited. We brainstormed all these cool things that we could do, but somebody had to be in charge of it. And they all said, Brian, you're in charge of it.
Right.
Okay, all right. So that was a really, really fun experience. We decided to have a whole year bicentennial celebration of George's birth in 2017 and 2018. And one of our big ideas would be to build a statue of George. And there's a local metalsmith, I guess you call him. And so I called him up, and he had done the statues at Centralia College and in front of the Law and Justice Center. And he said, Brian, this is going to be $100,000 to build a statue. And back in 2017, $100,000 was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so I was pretty intimidated by that. But we did the fundraisers, and we raised that money. And my wife, she had come by and heard the conversation, and she said, you should do a statue of George's wife too. And we absolutely should. Got a T-shirt that the Centralia Downtown Association did. So they're George and his wife, and kind of a fun little thing, Mary Jane. But they founded the town together. So we said, okay, so we'll do George and Mary Jane and their dog, Rockwood. So that statue's in front of the library now. And yeah, it was just a great event. And as part of that, we did the book and released that on the 200th anniversary of George's birth, and it was a great experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Just another good reason to be married, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, the best ideas
You
come
need
from
like,
your.
well, you need that other. I mean, for both sides, it's like you need that other person. That's awesome.
Find a good partner and then listen to that person.
Yeah.
That's the other trick, is to learn how to listen. I'm still learning.
Yeah.
24 years, I'm still learning.
Yeah, I think if anybody says that they've mastered it, they're just lying to you.
And themselves.
Yeah, yeah, and mostly to themselves. I did read the book.
I'm happy.
Yes, and the only thing that I would say is that I had to read it with my eyeballs. And where is the audiobook? When are we doing that?
Okay, not an audiobook guy, so yeah, maybe we'll have to do that.
Well, we may have to.
We've got the sound
maybe we
equipment
can.
here.
Yeah, maybe we can get that going. But yeah, I mean, I wanted to read about the 1800s. I didn't want to pretend that I was in the 1800s. Reading books with my eyes. It's I mean, you know how hard it is to read a book with kids and stuff and all the things you got going on. I get like so distracted. I don't know if you do this, but when I read books, I'll read like 15 pages and then realize I only remember reading like the first couple paragraphs and I got to like backtrack.
My goal for this year is to finish a book. I start a book, get all excited, and then move on. So I have my big pile. Well, the other thing that's kind of funny is a lot of people, because this was self-published, they'll put it on Amazon, and Amazon does print on demand. This is not on Amazon intentionally.
Okay.
Unless there's a used copy or something. So you can buy this at Book and Brush, you can buy it at the Historical Museum, you can buy it at a couple other local bookstores. But I said, no, if people want the book, they can't buy it online. They have to go to an actual bookstore to buy it. So we'll probably sell fewer copies, but I'm not in it to make money. I'm in it to support local history and local bookstores.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, do you ever feel like it, not so much that it's that you want to, I mean, I understand wanting to support the local bookstores. Do you feel like it kind of deprives like a whole group of people that would never hear of it otherwise, like somebody who lives in Idaho or Indiana or New York, that maybe don't know about this story? Because when I was reading it, one of the things I thought just off the premise of it, just the title, is that this is, like you were saying, kind of a great American story. It's got all the reasons that America is great are in there. All the things that have been troubled in America. I mean, it's such a typical story of somebody in this country trying to make it, and I feel like it would have such a wide. I mean, it could touch a lot of people, and it's a story that most people don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever? I mean, is that kind of?
I think.
Or do you think that just nobody would be interested outside of here? Or?
Well, there's a lot of online resources that people can go to and kind of get the basics of the story, and if they want to learn more, then they can find a copy. I get emails sometimes from people who want to buy it online, and I just direct them to Book and Brush here in Chehalis, and they can take care of them and ship it out to them.
But if we did an audiobook,
then
it would be like on Audible or wherever, or digital copies. Have you thought about doing a digital version that people could download?
So it's funny, you're saying you don't want to live in the 19th century. That's pretty much where my head is all the time.
Sure,
so,
yeah.
So I mean, I've read digital books and done audio, but that's not where my head is. So yeah, you could be our consultant on all these things.
Well, I just thought, this is. I mean,
it is a good idea.
If you live in the area, like, you should read this book. I found so many spots where it was great to read about the area that I live in, and it actually makes me want to mow my yard, just because I was thinking I hate doing stuff like that. I hate like dealing with weeds, and I'm reading about these pioneers that had settled the valley, and I just started thinking about, man, all the work that it takes and all the pride that they take in controlling the land, or developing the land and bringing it under control. I don't know if you're familiar with Joel Salatin at all. But he's a farmer, and he does farming in a way where he lets the way that God created the earth really do what it does, and he gets these unbelievable results. He's got a lot of books that he's written, and But I'm thinking about all that stuff and just how um, the land needs people to tend it for it to be optimized, but it also needs us to leave it alone to a
Hmm.
certain degree. But we do have to be involved. Like, with an apple tree, you can't just let it grow wild; it will kill itself.
Hmm.
So you need to tend it, and but you can't overdo it. Like where people are genetically modifying things and stuff like that. It operates just fine on that end of it, but it does need care. And I just was thinking about all these concepts as I'm reading about, you know, the area that I live in, or some of the people that, you come across last names that those families are still around in town. And yeah, so if you're in the area or from the area, it's it's a great read on that level for sure. That just gives you a lot of depth to your experience living here. I
Yeah.
feel like is that. I mean, did you kind of find that as you're writing it?
Yeah, it's so inspiring. And probably like you, I look back and see how much work there was to survive back then. Just incredible. So George showed up in the 1850s, and he settled out kind of where Plummer Lake is now in Centralia, kind of right by between the two Centralia exits. But yeah, he'd have to go out in the winter. The river was frozen over. He'd have to hack a hole in the river to get water for his stock and things like that. It it's the type of thing you hope that you can internalize and that your kids can learn and internalize, because life's so easy for us now, and that it's nice, but it doesn't make us the strong people we need to be, because challenges are coming. And to to have that resilience, you have to work for it. And you start by learning about what reality is. We're insulated from it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about this stuff all the time where, we always wonder, you know, are we doing our kids a disservice in not allowing them to do more of these things? I mean, not just in our own families, but societally, we're kind of extending adolescence all the time,
Hmm.
kind of endless college, and, you know, we're discouraging people from getting married young and having kids young. And, so we're just kind of extending this adolescence period in our culture. I know in New York, when we lived out there, you can't have a full driver's license till you're 18.
Hmm.
Um, there's a lot of barriers to work unless you know somebody who can put you to work either under the table or, but until you're a lot older.
We're doing such a disservice to our kids. Yeah, and that's something that I think about a lot. My kids are 14 to 20, but yeah, my oldest, he started working when he was 13 as a soccer ref, which is one of the few things that you can do when you're 13 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And not only are you making some money, but you're providing a service and you're getting some adult experiences in a good way. But I mean, when a coach or a parent's screaming at you and you're 13 years old and you have to deal with that,
Yeah.
that helps you grow. And so he's had a series of jobs, and now that he's 19, 20 years old, he goes to apply for something. He say, boy, look at this resume. Versus other people his age who have no work experience.
Right.
And it just, so yeah, that's one of the things I've been really passionate about. Is I would love to see in 5 years all of our public school system transformed, where every kid would graduate knowing how to do something.
Yeah.
Could be cooking, it could be welding, it could be whatever, but come up with something that you don't have to do this as your job. But if you're 18, you're graduated, you could do this and get paid for it and contribute to society. It's crazy. The kids come out of high school not knowing how to do anything, and they feel like their time in high school is wasted, and it was wasted. I like academic learning. I was an academic guy. People said, why did I have to learn algebra? I liked learning algebra.
Right.
But I'd be okay with replacing algebra or calculus with learning how to do animal husbandry or growing plants. Come out with some sort of skill. And you look back in history like this and see, yeah, people had to learn. And as George's story, and I can tell you a little bit if you want to.
Yeah.
But, he was born in Virginia, and his father was an enslaved African American. His mom was a white woman of English descent. And we don't know exactly what happened, but his father was sold away from the plantation in Virginia. And George was a baby in his white mother's arms, and she knew that he was destined for a life of slavery. So she sacrificed her opportunity to be his mother, and she gave him away to presumably friends or family. They came west with George as a baby, and they raised him on the frontier, and he learned those skills. He learned how to hunt, how to shoot. He was an expert marksman his whole life. He learned how to sew. He sewed his own clothes. So this suit that he's wearing here, he sewed that. And in fact, we just found another picture of him, and one of the ways we're able to confirm that it was him was he was wearing the same type of cut of coat.
Yeah.
But yeah, he sewed his own clothes. Cooked. When he moved to Centralia, he was a master barbecue guy. Everybody would always call George over to run the barbecue when they were having a get together. But yeah, that life on the Pioneer, we had to learn and be self-sufficient and be resilient. They ended up in Missouri, and Missouri, I don't know the history super well, but it was kind of between the North and South, so it had a little bit of the best and worst of both. So they had some racial laws there that were pretty bad. George started a timber business, and a white customer came in, kind of cheated George. George kind of tried to push back, and George ended up getting arrested for that. I say push back, it was an allegorical way, but even though he was legally in the right, the law was against him. So his white foster father went to the legislature in Missouri and had a law passed for the benefit of this individual person named George Washington to exclude him from some of these racial laws. But George still said this is not right. Same thing happened when he was trying to run a distillery there. So the 1850s said, I'm going to go west on the Oregon Trail. If there's a decent place in this world, I will find it. He was a young man in his 20s, I think, at that time, 20s or 30s. And his white foster parents came with him. They came on the Oregon Trail, had all sorts of adventures along the way there, ended up in Oregon, which, unbeknownst to him, had its own racial exclusion laws. And I didn't really know about this until a few years ago, but it was illegal to be a black person in the Oregon Territory in the 1840s and 50s. Pretty terrible laws that they had. So here was George, an illegal resident of this state, even though he was an American citizen. So the reason he came to Washington State, the reason he came to Centralia, was we were sort of in this weird netherworld where the law wasn't really paying attention. And actually the founder, or one of the first pioneers in Tumwater, was also a person of color, George Bush, which is funny that you have these presidential names.
Yeah.
So strange and coincidental. But so George Bush had settled in the Tumwater area, and there's still George Bush Park up there and George Bush School. And he settled here for the same reason. You could kind of land here and be underneath the radar screen. So George came up from Oregon Territory. It was still technically Oregon Territory, but to Centralia, and still faced racial, difficulties. Almost had his land stolen out from underneath him. We have that story in the book from some white people who came through and realized he couldn't legally be there. So again, his white foster father went to the legislature, this time here in Oregon, had a law passed for the benefit of this one individual. Basically, the Oregon Territorial Legislature said, yeah, we don't want blacks here, but this George Washington guy, he's okay.
Yeah.
So it's just crazy how this worked. And we have the copy of that law in there. So, and then Washington Territory split off from Oregon anyway, and it didn't have the racial exclusion law. So he settled here, married this woman, Mary Jane, who had her own fascinating story. She was part of a group of African Americans who came up to British Columbia from California, because California's racial exclusion laws were worse, as bad or worse. So the head of British Columbia said, hey, come on up here. We could use some workers. Everybody's off going for gold. So she came down. She and George got married, and they founded Centralia together in actually exactly 150 years ago. This is the 150th anniversary of them. They walked over to Chehalis, which was the county seat, filed the paperwork, and she named the streets. George laid them out, and Centralia was born 150 years ago.
Yeah, it's amazing on so many levels. One of the things that I really liked reading about was, we've got this like very racially intense environment right now, and one of the things that I like, because I feel like most of the conversation that happens out there is very binary, like either everybody's racist or nobody's racist. And one of the things I liked about the book is that it, this is a long time ago, when people when they think about that period in history, they think, well, everybody was racist against everybody. And it's more like regular life, where you had some people who were terrible. You had some people, he wouldn't have been able to do the things that he did without a large contingent of people who were supportive of him, and that was based on how he treated people. What did you kind of pick up on that as you're reading the book or writing the book, and and what did you kind of take away from, kind of the dichotomy that at play there racially, even back 150 years ago, it wasn't all just, even, and I'll kind of end with this, but one of the things I noticed in the Oregon legislature, the exclusion laws, they kept flip-flopping back and forth, and they were more and less popular in fairly short periods of time. Which kind of goes back to what we were talking about that earlier, that politicians will do whatever they think will get them elected, and then they'll, do the things they care about later. And so it was interesting to see that even back at that time, they were flip-flopping on this issue, all that time ago.
Well, one of the things that I didn't know about until I wrote this was the Homestead Act or the Settlement Act of Donation Land Claim specifically excluded people of color. You had to be a white person to homestead, and that created impacts that we're still seeing today. And George was able to homestead where Centralia is now because of his white foster parents. They were the ones who homesteaded it, and he bought it from them. And then once he had the city, there were other African Americans in the United States who founded cities, but most of them were places of refuge for other blacks to come. But George intentionally wanted to make a place where everyone would be welcome. And so people who settled here, some of them were, they came with racist attitudes from the South or whatever. And there are a couple stories in the book that are really, really remarkable.
Yeah.
One of them is a guy settled next to George, and he was from, I think, Kentucky, and he set his fences back because he didn't want his fences touching a black man's fences, which is so petty and so funny. So George set his fences back the same amount because he didn't want his fences touching this guy's. And so that actually created a sort of, it became a street because it was this empty no man's land. But so George wasn't afraid to just sort of be like, you know what, I'm going to push back a little bit too. But mostly he kind of met people where they were and just won them over through who he was. So there's another great story where after the town had been built up, he had a little lot. Guy had a lot next. Same sort of thing. Guy didn't want to be next to a black man, so he put up a big wall or a big fence. But then after a while, he cut a hole in the fence because it was too much of an inconvenience to walk around the fence to visit his new friend George. So that's, I guess, one of the things looking at our society now is, yes, we certainly have so many issues, but people tend to look at them as something that could never change or is just an insurmountable barrier. Change is, hundreds of years away, if ever. We have to tear everything down. And it's an organic thing where you build a relationship, and it was a more personal thing. And some of the people in the legislature, George knew. I mean, they were neighbors. And so if you can build those personal relationships, that can really make a lot of progress, much more than some of the fights that we have. So, and George is such a generous guy.
Yeah.
People just loved him, and he really won people over. But, I mean, the struggles continue. He founded a church. He built a church by hand. And at some point, as the city grew, he was a little late to church one day, and he came in, and a newcomer saw him and said, well, you got to sit in the back. You're a black guy. George's like, oh, huh. And he had founded the church. So then that was the First Baptist Church. So he went and founded the Second Baptist Church of Centralia. And, rather than fight this, like, okay, all right. And so pretty soon they missed him and they missed his donations. And so they welcomed him back to the First Baptist Church after a while. So, yeah, a lot of stories. And to see how he won people over is really inspiring and challenging.
Yeah, that's something I really liked about it. This is a little off topic, but do the schools in the area have this as required reading? Do you know?
I don't know if they have this book, but they definitely have curriculum that includes George.
Okay.
I've spoken to some of I think third grade is kind of one of the times they do it. But yeah, I think he's definitely part of the curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, having something like this when you're in high school, where some of these lessons, I mean, one of the things that I've talked with my kids about a ton is, when you're that age, the fallacy of permanence, like that.
Oh, yeah.
That it's something that is easy to fall into. So, the whole like, oh, my life is over, over one thing that happens, or, they get in a relationship and they get their heart broken. It's like, oh, I'll never love again, or nobody's going to ever, this kind of catastrophizing and this idea of permanence. And I think one of the things I also really appreciate about his life it plays that out that, nothing is final. Failure is not final, success is not final. You're constantly going through life, failing and succeeding and growing and changing, and people come in and, I've got stuff like this going on in my own life, where, people come in and cause an issue. And, it's easy for people to go like, oh man, this is never going to work. But, a lot of times it's that outlasting, just continuing to do the next right thing to do. And a lot of times you can, it's an awesome example for young kids getting ready to go out and live life, to have that kind of in the back of their mind that, there's going to be people that don't like you for all kinds of reasons,
Right.
And there's going to be times in your life where you're going to have to just win them over. There's nothing you can do about it.
It's not fair. It's not right. It shouldn't
Correct.
be. Yeah.
Yeah. But,
It's
like
true.
we talked about on our, on our last episode, what does fair even mean? Life doesn't care about fair at all. That's something that we haggle over a lot, and we get consumed by. But that's not actually part of the economy of life anywhere in history. Fair is not a thing. And so you have to just work with what you have to work with. You get the life that you have. We've been incredibly blessed, obviously. But whether you're blessed or not, it is what it is. And so it's really cool to see somebody with a lot of disadvantages overcome all that stuff through perseverance and character and treating people better. A lot of these kind of biblical concepts, treating people better than they treat you, winning them over, with generosity and kindness and all that kind of stuff, without being weak. You can be, the words escaping me, but you don't have to be a bull in a china shop, but you also don't have to be the slaughtered lamb all the time.
Well, and that's what you said. It's so important to read history and understand that. And it's unfortunate that it feels dry. And I think there's a lot of life in this book and others. So I love having kids read biographies of historical figures. And nobody's perfect, but you can see examples of how to overcome that. And
that's part of the point, right?
Yep.
I think that's one thing that helped me when I was getting into reading more was, well, man, everybody's got a really non-linear life. They make huge mistakes. That's how you learn most things anyway. That's what working your life out is about. There's a lot of strain and setback, and you don't learn how to do things the right way generally until after you've done them the wrong way.
Yeah, and like you say,
times.
it's not the end and the catastrophizing.
Yeah.
I wish that we all knew a lot more about history. The things that are going on now, if you have more of a historical context, people say, oh, it's never been this bad. I'm like, it's been pretty bad. Read about the Civil War. It was pretty bad.
Oh, yeah.
So that's helpful. And it's interesting talking about fairness, because we tend to think of fairness as, oh, it's harder for me than it should be. But fairness goes the other way too. And like you said, the generosity, that biblical idea of unmerited gifts. And George was so good at that, where he was constantly helping people. And not only just, oh, here's a person on the side of the road, let me give him $5 or whatever we do now. But in that situation, he was a pioneer. He had land to clear. He had work to do. So he would give people work.
Yeah.
And that was so helpful for them. And he had that savviness. I really admire that of, okay, you're down. What can I do that's going to help you get up? And some of these people were really losers. And he was able to discern, okay, here's work I can give them. Here's guidance I can give them. Here's a gift I can give them to get them started. They're starving right now. I'll give them food, and then I'll give them a job, and then he can pick up more food at the end of the week at the store where I have credit. So I admire that so much and want to learn how to be more effective in that sort of altruistic charity. There's a fun story in there where this family was starving, and the only time that George and his wife got really mad, like furious, was they got there and saw that these kids were starving, and they said, why didn't you come to us earlier?
Yeah.
Like they were furious. Not that they let the kids starve, but they let it get that bad. So gave them work, and so many people came there and said after the fact, yeah, George is the reason that my life turned out okay. He helped me out. I was down. I couldn't pay my mortgage, and so I said, "You better just foreclose on me." He's like, "No, no, I know you're good for it. Come back to me." And then he would help them survive. And people just, I would encourage people to read the book for that alone, just how he helped sustain the town during this crisis they had in the 1890s. And so many people said George was the best man I ever knew. Well, Isaac's great uncle, right? Great uncle. Um, he would talk about that. Yeah, George was the best man I ever knew, and it's really neat to have that sort of living history going all the way back to the mid 1800s that we can connect with that. And it's been neat to see Centralia really love that history. And there are a lot of reasons to be fascinated by George Washington. I mean, this African American town founder, this pioneer, he has this presidential name, all these things. But the thing that got me most in love with the story is just what a good example and what a good man he was. So Centralia is celebrating 150 years this year. They have a new thing called Founders Day that they started a few years ago. That was an idea that came out of the bicentennial observance some people were passionate about. So that's coming up. I wrote the date down. I think August, I don't want to get it wrong, August 9th.
Okay.
So if folks want to go, it starts at 9 o'clock. They have a fun run. 10 o'clock to noon, they're going to have a historical talk. I'm going to give a little talk. They've got a day of service, which is kind of cool. They're going to have a graveside observance at 1 o'clock. So encourage people to go by and be part of that, because it's pretty cool when you've got someone worth knowing about and you celebrate that. It just makes everybody a little bit more connected and grounded.
Yeah. I think it's important to know how stuff starts.
Yeah.
Because generally, I mean, this is one of the things that I've heard that I really believe is true. How a thing starts is usually how a thing ends.
Yeah.
And I living on both coasts, I've seen some of that. How the East Coast started, and what the culture is like, and the people are like, and then how the West Coast started, and that culture as well. It's really interesting to see that all these years later, these centuries later, that the ethos is still, it follows it. Because of how it started. It's kind of I think the place that I heard it first, actually, that concept was, they're like, well, if you have two people that get into a relationship, through adultery, they usually, somebody ends up cheating on that person, and it's like how a thing starts is usually how it ends also. And so I think having a good understanding of how the place that you live got started, I think that stuff, there's a thread that follows it, whether you're conscious of it or not. It just becomes such a part of the environment. And we're in a really interesting time in our community right now. We're growing exponentially. There's all kinds of factors causing that, and we really have an opportunity to direct what kind of a place we want to be ongoing. And I think having this as a touchstone to say, this was about a guy who had all these challenges, and they were significant and unfair too. Yeah. To say the least. I mean, there were giant issues that he had little to no control over, and he went through all. He used all the people that could help him. There's another book that I read, and one of the things I loved about it when I read it was, it said, if you want to do well in your life, take an inventory of who do I know and how can they help me. I don't think that's a usury idea. I think it's just knowing your surroundings and giving yourself the best shot at doing well. And he did that so well, along with winning people over, despite all the prejudice he had to deal with and all the actual, legal things that were in a hindrance to him. And he got special laws put in place by other white folks. I mean, it's just, the whole thing's pretty amazing. And it was just him doing the right thing. It's so to have that as a touchstone, as we're kind of in this phase in our community where there's going to be a lot of people coming in from outside of here. And so if we don't have people in the local community who are going to step up into roles of public service and have, kind of a north star of who we are and what we want to be about as a community. We can embrace the growth, but guide it in a way where we don't lose who we are as an area and as a this culture that we have here. Um, and
That's really interesting because George was a land developer and he was part of this huge time of growth. And one of the things that's noteworthy is when he was laying out Centralia, he made the lots bigger than other towns and he sold them for less. So much so that people were suspicious. People thought he was trying to pull a scam on them. But the one requirement that he had was he didn't want people to come in and just buy and speculate and flip it. He wanted people to come and stay. So he'd say,
yeah,
I'll sell you this for whatever, $10 for a lot, when he could have gotten 25 or 30 or whatever the number was, but I want you to stay.
yeah,
And so that created a little bit of a different community right there. And as we're growing and developing, the challenge I see is I have kids that are they going to be able to live here, and houses costs. I mean, my house now is worth 4 or 5 times what I paid for it
right.
25 years ago. How can they possibly afford that? I would love to see some sort of a way that there could be that accommodation for people. We're going to help you get started. I don't know how that could possibly work.
Man, you're going to get me going. No.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because, I mean, obviously, that's the work that I do. And obviously we've done quite a bit of rental housing, but I also, which you have to have a certain percentage of, but I do firmly believe, outside of that if you don't have a really strong single family residence, home ownership presence in your community, I mean, the vast majority, nobody takes care of things they don't own. Not nearly as well as they would if they owned them. So if most of your community are, for lack of a better term, temporary, because they don't own the home and the land that they live on, you're going to have culture issues, no matter what kind of culture you're trying to create. Because, I mean, if you're not invested, you're not invested.
Yeah, it's such a challenge.
So, yeah, I mean, man, that could be a whole show by itself, talking about the challenges there and, why stuff costs so much. And, if you want to know more about what I think about that, you could tune into the to the planning commission meetings. But I won't bore everybody on that now. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and things can absolutely be done. Will they be done? I'm getting more pessimistic. As time goes on. I came in pretty optimistic and pretty. I feel myself getting decidedly more jaded about it. But the thing is, and we were talking about this a little bit before. Maybe this is a good time to transition into some of those things. But I kind of have this this theory about the generation before us. There was so much abundance. Kind of in the 80s.
Kind of the baby boom generation.
Yeah. They were making so much money. Things were so good. And not that there weren't any challenges, but there was, just kind of statistically and by the numbers. And they kind of checked out of public life, by and large, I feel like. I know a lot of people in that generation that are like, oh, we'll just let politicians take care of that. I'm going to go out and get my business going and all that stuff, which is fine. I obviously have nothing against businesses. I mean, you need to have businesses where people are actually getting a thing done that people want to have done. I mean, you need to have a strong presence of that, which I think is another issue that is it's not just a Lewis County or Centralia or Chehalis issue. It's a nationwide issue. It's a cultural issue that we have where we're kind of demonizing the people that actually go out and produce a thing.
Right.
But if you don't have that, I mean, you don't really have anything else that comes behind it. So, yeah, I think I sort of forgot where I was even going with that.
Public,
but yeah,
public
but
service
just public service. Yeah, no. So it seems like there was a void, like a generation of void, where the people who are actually out in the community, working, creating, raising families, getting married, all that stuff, were off doing that and largely left politics to politicians at every level. And then we got what we have, where we've just over politicized everything, over legislated everything. There's a interesting book called Overruled. Just talks about just the massive amount of regulation, how stifling it is for people. And I live in that world,
Mm-hmm.
and it's pretty, yeah, it can be pretty frustrating. Um, so I've been talking with people about this since I've moved back, and I'm noticing a lot of the, you know, what I consider really strong people in the community. I know you've gotten involved in the area that you can. I've gotten involved in the area that I have enough time to do it, and maybe enough, just barely enough knowledge to be in. But I have noticed a shift in our local politicians. People are taking positions for less money than they could make on the open market, but they see they see where we're at in the history of the area, and it matters to them to stick around, get more engaged than they ever have been, maybe run for office when they hadn't been interested in politics before. So I feel like we're having this kind of renaissance moment here in the area, and it's really interesting. I don't know if you've noticed the same thing, but people that I would have never thought would have gotten involved in politics are now leaving more lucrative careers, spending more of their free time volunteering for these boards and commissions and these things where you don't make any money. All you get is grief, and but you believe in what we have here, and you believe in a vision of that it could just be more of what it has been historically, a decent place for all kinds of folks to live together. I mean, my wife's from New York. She was born in California and moved to New York at a young age. And one of the things that struck her about when we moved back here, she'd never really spent much time here, was how all the different kinds of people all live together. Like in New York, it's very separated. Like the rich people live over here and poorer people live over here. And, you have many areas in New York where if you don't speak a foreign language, like you can't even do anything. Like all the signs are in Russian, or they're in, whatever. I mean, I've been to areas where like there's only Russian people that live in this several block area radius. And so if you don't speak Russian, like you can't even order food, or, so like it's a very separate area because that's where everybody came, and they settle there and they have these communities, and there's something really cool about that. But the togetherness isn't there that we have, and for better or for worse. But I think it's something that we do have here. I think it's something, hearkening back to the book, that was sort of the original intent. And so can we retain that as we grow? Can we retain kind of our agricultural roots? Can we retain kind of the blue collar ethos
That's
that
going to
we
be a
have?
challenge with how expensive things are. And talking about public service, I guess my take on that would be, in America with democratic self-governance, we look at elected positions, and especially something like the presidency, it gets so hyper focused, and these smaller local boards, commissions don't get as much attention, and that's where the legislature has more of an impact on our lives than the president does.
Oh,
Except for taking us, to war or something like that. But in general, if we focus more on these local things, we'd have more of an impact on our own lives. But going beyond that, the thing that I'm really interested in, going back to the pioneer era, is non-political associations, and I'm involved with a lot of those. But you look around at our rural heritage and the Grange halls that we have all over the place. I don't know if folks know the history of the Grange, but it's incredible. And if I had, if I could peel off more time in my life, I would love to see the Grange halls revitalized. I think they're an absolutely incredible example. So, maybe 80, 100 years ago, when the roads weren't good, people didn't have cars, there was a Grange hall every couple miles, and that was your social life. You'd go there, and it was they'd have little baseball leagues. So, St. Urban would play against Eveline, would play against New Walk-in Hill. You'd have political associations there. They got the white fog lines down the road because otherwise you'd veer off in the dark. So just little things to advocate. If the railroads were charging all this money, the Granges would allow rural people to come together and have a counterbalance. And now people, I guess, the baby boom generation, in addition to focusing on themselves in terms of business or whatever, that was about the time that television came in, and now the internet has supercharged it.
Yeah.
But you don't have people just getting together in real life anymore, and we are so much the less for it.
Yeah.
So people have asked me how I have all this time to do all these different things that I'm involved with, and I think one of the reasons is my wife and I have never had a television. You just, how many hours a day when I was a little kid did I spend watching TV? And that's hours that I've gained. I've lost most of them back to social media scrolling now, so I need to do a reset on that.
Yeah.
But I would love to see, another one of my goals in life is I would love to see every person everywhere, but let's focus on Lewis County, involved with something outside of their own home, whether it's their church or their little league or a volunteer group or something. But if everybody had a little role, you feel so much better about yourself because you know you're contributing. One of the hats that I wear is president of the Friends of the Seminary Hill Natural Area, which was, I was asked to take that on so that an elderly sweet woman could retire, so I did. And we take care of this hill in Centralia. If you've never been there, it's really cool, 75 acres, just on the eastern slope of Centralia. But we have work parties throughout the year, and we have people come in, 80, 90 years old. We have 5, 6, 7-year-old kids. So how many times do you get to work alongside, from 5 to 30 to 85 years old? It's so cool. And we just planted several hundred trees there. I just put out an email a few days ago for people to help us water these new trees. And people are coming in, young people who want to find a way to be leaders and servants. I've kind of been home and I don't really have anything to do. Oh, it's so exciting to me to give people an opportunity to use their energy and feel good about what they're doing and have a reason to get up and get out and connect with other people, because we're all so angry at each other and so divided. And those guys, they're not just wrong, they're evil.
Right. Yeah.
And for good or bad, it's not that simple. I mean, what is it Solzhenitsyn said, that evil runs through the heart of me, something like that. So we're all good and bad. And when you can get together with someone and we're working together, I don't know what your politics are, but we're working and we're planting trees, we're having a good time. And then all of a sudden I see on Facebook, oh my gosh, he likes this guy. Well, he's a good guy anyway. I know it. And so that's where it used to be. And racial division in the George Washington's time, but certainly political too. But one of the things that's interesting is going through Centralia the first 50 years, where a lot of these stories came from, they would have barn raisings. And you needed a barn raised, everybody come out and help you do it because they knew that you were going to help out and come when they needed it done. And we need more things like that. And one of the, I guess, detriments to how affluent we are, and I know there's struggle, there are people who are really struggling, but even people who are struggling have so much affluence. Very few people are truly in our community starving like they would be in maybe a third world country or 100 years ago. But even in our affluence, we're able to be separated from each other. I can do it myself. I can pay to have it done. I don't need to depend on people.
Right.
And we're so much the less because we've lost that interdependence.
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, me and Isaac had talked about this quite a bit when we were in Italy, and one of the things he was telling me was that one of the things he loved about Italy so much was that they have these town squares.
Yeah.
And at night, everybody goes out because not everybody's got air conditioning. It's hot. I mean, man, if you're in Italy right now, I mean, have you been anywhere over there?
I have, yeah.
I mean, is there anything more brutal? I mean, that was the thing. I'm such a humidity wuss. When I moved to the East Coast, I couldn't handle. It's like living in Satan's butt crack. It's like just horrible in the summer, and man, Italy was it was brutal. I think I took a picture of my phone one day, and it was like, the real temperature is like 89. It said feels like 135, and I was like, that's and it did. It felt hotter than that actually. But one of the things he said he really liked about it was that at night everybody comes out, all the old people, all the kids, all the families, everybody's in these squares and they're all doing whatever. You're meeting and hanging out with the people in your community, and we don't have a lot like that. We don't have a culture of it, and
here's something cool going on in the earphones.
Oh, you know what that is?
It's a rock and roll.
That's
It's an important phone call you need to take.
No.
You can just put them on speaker. Bring them on the pod.
I should, yeah. It was, yeah. Well, it's on silent, but it's also vibrating. I was like, what is that?
Yeah, there's public squares, and it's neat to see because Centralia actually created something like that in the last 5 or 6 years, the Pine Street Plaza. They took a half block between Tower and the railroad station and just closed it off. And now you have that. You have a place where people can come in. They have the farmers market there. They have events.
Yeah.
Tomorrow during the 4th of July, they'll have stuff throughout. And I'd love to see JAlves do something like that. I think they're talking about closing off Boisfort Street where the farmers market is, which would have a little bit of a traffic impact. I'd love to see them take the old bank drive-through and make that into a little public.
Yeah.
And if you could just have a space like that, it's just great. And one of the things I like to do is play music. I have my guitar or my ukulele, and just that feels a little strange now. We're enough separated from everyone has their Bluetooth and their speakers. Why would you play music? But a generation or two ago, if you wanted music, you had to make it.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a little bit part of that old-fashioned spirit that I'm trying to keep alive.
Yeah.
I was talking to my uncle, my aunt's husband, and he grew up in Israel. His dad was one of the first Jewish refugees from Germany to settle there back when it was known as Palestine. And I know there's a lot of political questions about that now, but when he was growing up there in the early days, the 30s and I guess the 40s, he said they had maybe 2 radio stations that all played the same thing.
Yeah.
No television. I mean, it was very rudimentary. So if people just come out and he would play accordion, and everyone would come and dance and sing along with him because they all knew the same songs.
Yeah.
And it was not from some great desire to be folky. It was just, wow, hey, cool, there's music. Yay,
Right.
everybody, this is exciting. This
Yeah.
is new. And again, our affluence has created the situation where you don't need to have that. And it's a little bit weird if somebody does it. Fortunately, I'm comfortable being weird in public, so I come out and I play my instrument. And I actually wrote a song about George Washington that's in the book, and I played that for the little 3rd graders when I was talking to them one time. And it was so cool. One of the moms who was there listening, or one of the aides, she said during one of the verses, she all of a sudden got emotional. I'm like, okay, this is good. Connecting with people on that 3-dimensional level of music and history there's something there that is exciting and feels, maybe can give you some heart as you're getting frustrated with the political situation, that it's a lot more 3-dimensional and organic than what, this linear win-loss record has us believe.
Yeah. No, I think we've talked about this quite a bit, just off. But I've been thinking about this quite a bit as well. That the problems that come with prosperity, there's no part of the rise and fall of civilization that doesn't come with its own issues. And we kind of get into this mindset where we think that the more prosperous we can make ourselves or make somebody, that eliminates all their problems, and it definitely doesn't. It presents other issues that have to be dealt with, and so that's another thing that I've more recently just been thinking a lot about is this idea that because we're so prosperous that we shouldn't have any issues is just silly. It just creates other issues that we have to adapt to. We have to come back to our principles, figure out how to reconcile all that stuff. I mean, there's so many good things about, having video and, audio resources. I mean, I can listen to any lecture from anybody throughout history. There's an enormous amount of knowledge that you can acquire. There's a lot of perspective that you can get. You can go on pro walk tours and see how people live in other countries. And I mean, there's so much good out there, but it also comes with its own issues that you have to be mindful of.
Yeah, and if we're wise and we can find that balance, we can do a pro walk tour of Florence, but we'll also go up and walk Seminary Hill Natural Area and get some real life experience. And that's the challenge. And boy, hearing some of your conversation last week on the pod about how you raise up kids in this environment, and it was fascinating to hear you guys talk about your upbringing in Centralia. It feels like it was a little bit more, kids, if you want to have, see ya, and you just kind of do it. And now it's so much more structured, and maybe as our affluence level rises, our anxiety level rises, and just how do we keep the best as we no longer have the things that force us to be the best, So that's the challenge I face, and I'm certainly not living up to it, but it's fun to find other people to do alongside, and look forward to, as your pod kind of continues hitting these different topics, because there are ways to keep balance, but we've got to try. My wife's very, very good at reminding me about balance.
Yeah. No, you just the older I get, the more I just realize you got to be really intentional about everything that you want to have happen, and even when you're intending as hard as you can, you just miss the mark so much. But you're a lot closer. It's kind of that quote. If you aim for the stars, even if you miss, or if you aim for the moon, even if you miss, you're still among the stars, or whatever the quote is. I'm butchering, but it's kind of that if you don't take that idea that, well, I have to hit like every mark, otherwise I'm a hypocrite or I'm a loser or what. Everybody's a hypocrite. Don't worry about it. Like nobody lives up to everything that they hold as a core tenet all the time.
Yeah.
But if you're aiming at, as maybe Jordan Peterson would say, if you're aiming at like the highest and best thing, that's the best you can do. And as you continue to aim up at those things, it puts you in a whole different level than you would be had you not even aimed for them. So I think, being able to have, that's one of the hopes that we have with this. One, it's just kind of an elaborate scheme for me to spend more time with my friends, but and to for my kids to hear some of the stuff I think. But no, I think one of the things we'd like to see happen is to kind of go back to something that we talked about earlier. I think people get so obsessed with these national politics that have little to no impact on your daily life, and then they don't pay attention to the local politics that have massive impacts on your daily life. And one of the things that we talked about before we started this thing, or that I've heard from people as we were kind of kicking the idea around, is that it's really frustrating. We all would like to know more about who we're voting for, what we're voting for. There's almost no good information. It's really hard to find. Especially with any kind of nuance. That's the challenge with kind of the traditional news sources, is the way they're set up. It's very short time frames,
right.
Short articles, and there's a lot of stuff. Most of the things that we're doing, you can't know what you need to know in, I don't know what the typical article word count is, but it's not enough.
600 words, yeah.
Yeah.
And so on the one hand, it's not enough. On the other hand, it's way more than anybody's going to read.
For sure.
Yeah, and I worked in the newspaper for a long time here at the Chronicle, and boy, I would work so hard to craft this story, and every quote I would go over, and then all people would read is the headline.
Yeah.
Most people. Or if they're super into it, they would find one little thing I did wrong in the story and they'd blast me for it. So it's an interesting challenge, and to find that nuance is difficult. And talking about public service, it's interesting looking here. Some people who are in public service, there are a lot of ways and reasons that they do it, but some people, they just like people and they're social and they get connected and get involved in a lot of things. And then we're looking around, we need someone for the legislature. He seems like a good guy. And
yeah.
Granted, he wants it and he's trying for it as well, but there's something to be said for that too, where maybe they're not an ideologue on any particular issue, but they're well dispersed enough and connected that they're going to kind of understand the impacts a little bit, hear from different sides and perspectives, and it's not the worst way to run a representative.
Yeah, isn't it funny
government.
that we tend to, on both sides of the aisle, we tend to want the most idealistic candidate, like the biggest zealot we can find.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and then when they get in there, they're actually not very effective, because legislating is an incredibly messy pursuit. As I've gotten older, I remember being young going like, well, these guys have to be 100% on these things that matter to me. As I get older, I realize that it's much more of a game of inches, and the slow grind of gaining ground over long periods of time. And so one of the things that I've heard talked about a lot is that when either party gets too idealistic, the other party gains a ton of ground where they're being kind of zealots on the handful of things that they want to do, and unless it's 100% of the pie, I'm not voting for it. Well, there's no such thing in a country this big with people that have this many different interests and this many different priorities that you can get 100% of the pie on the first go around. And it's much more of an incrementalist game And so as a voting base, or one of the things I'm learning as a voter myself, is that, you know, it's okay. I don't want to vote somebody out if they're heading in the direction I'd like, and you kind of have to take the long-term view of it instead of going, well, this guy wasn't, you know, pro-business enough, or they weren't pro, this social agenda thing enough, and so I'm going to get somebody who's even more because they didn't get enough of the pie. Well, you just end up with zero of the pie.
Yeah.
Most of the time. And so I think one of the things I'm learning, kind of being involved, is that it's one of the things I really appreciate about the group that we have at the Planning Commission. Actually, is that we've got a lot of different perspectives, a lot of people that I suspect, and we don't talk about politics at all because it's not really it's not a very political
let me
agenda.
Interview you. So you serve on which organization now?
It's the Lewis County Planning Commission.
Lewis County Planning Commission. Okay.
And
so you're the reason that we do or don't have houses, or what do you do on the Planning Commission?
Yeah, no, we basically deal with land use, and we're a recommending body.
Okay.
So we don't make any decisions at all. We go, here's what we think, and that gets sent off to the commissioners. So the way that I've always viewed it, and kind of what I kind of always try to frame up for everybody in the room, that I strongly believe this is our role, is not so much decision makers. I think this helps the community as they see what we're doing. But my goal more than anything is we get brought something that somebody wants to do, or the staff thinks needs to be done. And I view my role in it as trying to ask as many really good questions as I can to really put these ideas through their paces, so that by the time it gets to the commissioners who actually make the decision, it doesn't matter what we say. We could all say, hey, we really think you should do this, and they could go, no, we're not doing that. So we don't have any authority at all. But so I view it more of as really a position of service to the commissioners, to say, let's try to flesh this thing out, ask as many good questions as we can think of, try to hit this from all angles, see if we can expose any of the unintended consequences of what this might do. Give a place for the public to come in and comment and get on the record, and let them know, hey, this thing's coming. This is kind of the first stop on the train. You want to get on board with it if you care about it, and before it gets to final decision. Because once it gets to final decision and then you hear about it, it's a lot harder to undo these things than to have added your perspective. And I mean, nobody watches these things. Nobody comes to the meetings. Every once in a while, we'll get a big meeting on a hot issue, but that a lot of people feel like they're being affected by. And Mindy's really done a good job at trying to. I know her goal.
Who's Mindy?
Mindy is the director for community development.
Okay, the county staff person.
County, yeah. And she really has tried to enhance the profile of the commission to try to get people commenting in the right spot in the process. But we're hoping that if people are listening to this thing, that they will get a better understanding of how their local politics works, so that whatever is important to them, at the very least, they can get it into the right spot of the process. They can understand who they're voting for and what that person's actually supposed to be doing.
So when and where do you guys meet?
We lead a meet at the Lewis County Development Building.
Okay. That's the big white building there up by the library?
It's by the courthouse.
Oh, it's by the courthouse. Okay.
And so there's a new...
the wood ones.
Yeah, and it's got some brick on it, which it's a good-looking building.
Okay.
I know the guy that designed it. He did a good job. or at least championed the design. So he did a really good job with it.
And when do you meet?
Every other Tuesday, generally.
So if I show up there, I can give public comment?
Yeah, you can give public comment. You can even give testimony on the record, depending on where we're at in the process and all those things. So.
And that's getting back to.
And you can get it. There's a YouTube channel for it, actually.
Wow.
So.
Does it have as many hits as Isaac's YouTube channel?
I think if you go on there, you may be the first.
So I could be get in on the ground floor.
Yeah.
It just makes me think you could do walking tours of housing developments and explaining stuff and how does this actually work. And that's the thing I kind of dream of, is how can we have people feel a little bit more connected and understanding, because there's such people don't have a clue. It's so opaque and so many steps and processes, and
Yeah.
people just basically feel like they've gotten cheated by the system, and it's all just going to do its thing anyway. And there's probably some truth to that, but most, boy, politicians get a bad rap, and maybe they should, but most people are fairly idealistic or wanting to have good things happen, and they disagree on what the good things are. But
Right.
you're a volunteer on a planning commission. You have better things to do with your life. You have better things to do with your time. But you
For
see,
sure.
maybe I could do this, contribute a little bit, maybe make it a little bit better. So I would love to see us continue to try to explain how these things work, welcome people in, show up, learn a little bit, and feel like, yeah, I kind of understand the process. It's not this huge black box that's against me. But boy, American democracy depends on participation and understanding and people buying into it a little bit. And
Yeah.
getting back to my little hobby horse of people having non-political associations, there's this great French sort of observer de Tocqueville who came over and toured America in the early 1800s. And one of the things he said that America did that was so different than everybody else is all these little associations, these little community groups where democracy gets its start. And kids can do that too. They can see that here we're kind of having group decision making made, and you know, if it doesn't go well, maybe we move forward from that and we can learn and we can see each other as other humans, not as a force to oppose, but there's some sort of sense of collaboration, or at least we're kind of in this together. And there was a guy here in Chehalis named Gail Shaw, and he's the namesake of the swimming pool. He and his wife, he donated the land that the new elementary schools are on. And a really cool story I got to do with the newspapers, I got to interview him, one of the last big interviews he did. And he was a fascinating guy. He'd come to public meetings and quote Aristotle. I mean, who does that? But he and a bunch of guys started the Chehalis Industrial Park back, boy, in the 50s because a mill had burned down and there was a concern that we don't have enough jobs for people. So they bought some land, started trying to create industry, saved that tiny little railroad that kind of runs behind the schools there along Interstate Avenue. The railroad company was actually tearing that up, and they bought it from the railroad and put it back together so that this new industrial park could be served by rail. But one of the things he said is if you can get a group of people, they get a P.O. box, they get a phone number. You needed those things back in the day. Now it can probably just be an email address. And you get them all to agree that whatever the group decides they're going to go with, even if you don't like it, you're not going to take your ball and leave and go home.
Right.
It's like you're unstoppable.
Yeah.
You can do anything. You need a P.O. box, a phone number, and everyone agrees they're going to go with what the group decides. And that group's still going 70 years later, the Industrial Commission. It turned into the Port of Chehalis, several decades later. But they're the reason that we have a lot of the jobs and the things we have around here. And nobody knows that, and they're fine to not have people know it. But people thinking ahead, looking beyond themselves, it's that same George Washington spirit. I'm going to found something that can be good for everybody, and we're all going to kind of pitch in a little bit. And it's kind of fun. If you can find, I guess that's the other thing, is it's not just, got to go to this planning commission and it just sucks.
For sure.
You there's some other fun, and you can have a good time with it. And to me, finding people to do good things alongside is a lot more fun than sitting home and watching TV or doom scrolling on my phone.
Yeah.
A little bit more real life, I think, is it's what's going to save us all. Meeting your neighbors, hanging out with them, not seeing them and did they vote for or against this candidate.
Yeah.
I almost said a candidate's name, but I'm not going to. Just they're real people, and I actually maybe kind of like them.
Yeah.
Outside of politics.
Well, people have all different kinds of reasons why they vote for anybody. I mean, I've known some, I remember I had some friends in New York that you would never in a million years guess that they voted. I mean, I would say in both directions that they would have voted for those people, but there was, a handful of issues that, were contrary to a lot of the other stuff, but it mattered most to them, or things that you would think would matter most to them. They're like, well, that's fine. It's not that big of a deal. So, yeah, I do think this whole, hypersensitivity to what party you typically, go with or what your ideology might be, we're going to really try to stay away from that here.
Yeah.
Because it's not productive.
No.
And it's divisive more than it is, just any kind of a productive pursuit to even care about that stuff. It's really about the ideas, whether the ideas are good or not, whether the ideas actually produce the results that you hope for, not being married to all those things and just going, well, maybe, we tried that, it didn't work at all. We thought it might. I mean, that's another thing that I don't know if you've noticed this in the things that you're doing, but the difference between when you establish something in that realm, legislatively or otherwise, in a code, or between there and implementation, I mean, it couldn't possibly be a further distance. You know what I mean? Like, we've done plenty of things where we tried to flesh it out as well as we could, and then it gets into implementation and the people who are actually holding up the standards, and it's nothing like what you put through there.
The devil's in the details.
Yeah, and even when you have it all detailed out, I mean, you can't possibly think of everything in every situation. But I mean, yeah, that's another thing that people don't realize is that there is a giant distance that gets traveled there, and what you put on paper and then what actually happens out there in the world can be totally different, totally unintended. And that's why your unelected people are so important. When you do get the chance to vote for somebody, I think a key characteristic or a key thing you want to look for is how good are they going to be at hiring the right kind of people to actually implement these things. Because no matter what they think or what they put on paper, there's going to be a person at the end of the line that stamps your paper, doesn't stamp your paper, runs across those one-off situations that happen constantly and makes the call, and they either do it in a common sense way or they do it in a way that's just stifles everything that is the point of it.
It's so hard to hire people. It's so hard. I look at big institutions, and you hire a new executive director, a new president, and it feels like close to half the time that person's gone within a year because it wasn't a good fit.
Oh yeah,
it's not 50%, but it's close. And that's the thing I haven't figured out yet is how do you hire someone good? How do you make sure that it works? Because the system is not geared for that, and I'm not quite sure why.
No, well, hiring is just incredibly difficult for everybody because you don't actually, it's kind of, it's kind of like when people are dating around. It's like they're not really being themselves when they're trying to get the job, and then after they're there for a year, then you really get to see what they're like because all the pretenses have fallen away. Yeah, I think it's really difficult. I think the best thing, there's a quote that I really like, but you attract what you are, not what you want. I think I see that a lot. I see it a lot with relationships, but I had a friend and he used to have just all these terrible relationships, and he was a really great guy, and he's like, why am I having all these horrible relationships? And I'm like, well, you're hoping to marry a certain kind of girl, but you're meeting them in a place where those people don't hang out. You're, and the particular situation is like, you want to marry church girl, but you're only dating bar girls. And so, you're the bar guy. So is church girl going to want to hang out with you? Like, when are you going to meet?
Right.
And so, and that's a very surfacey example of it, but I think
you're exactly right. It's the pool. And
even beyond that, like, what's inside of you, you will attract people like you, not the people that you wish you were like. Right?
Got to do some work on yourself.
Yeah. Huh? So if you want to attract a higher caliber employee, and as a leader, that's a really sobering idea to take ownership over, right? Because if you're constantly going, I have terrible employees, it's probably because I'm not as good of a leader as I need to be. I'm not attracting or training or developing people to the level that I would have to have the kind of organization that I want.
Well, there's a story in the book where George, he was kind of having people come in. What was it? He had some woods and a forest, and people could cut firewood there and sell it to the train company to run the steam engines before coal. And he had a guy came in and lied about how much wood that he had. He cut 20 cords and he said, I cut 10. And George knew. He's like, oh, okay. All right. And he wrote it down. But then the time came to sell it to the company. He's like, oh, you said you only got 10. Uh-oh. And so, the guy got caught in his lie. And so George kind of held him accountable in a gentle but extremely firm way. And then George ended up giving the extra money to the guy's wife. So he still made it right, but he made the guy feel the pain.
Yeah.
And the wife got the money for household goods. So, yeah, there's how to see and hold someone accountable and help them get to that next stage and be like, I saw that, you lied, I'm going to catch you for it, but that doesn't define you.
Yeah.
I'll give you another chance. And then people often rise to that. And if they continually don't, okay, that's then maybe where we if you're an employee, we separate ways. But um, I was going to say to your previous story about meeting in the bar. So the community service aspect, I tell this to my kids, it's helpful in so many ways. So when I was in high school, I was in Key Club, which is a Kiwanis-oriented youth service group, and our first kind of community project after we founded this group was to help the Lewis County Historical Society with a fundraiser where they squeeze cider. People bring their apples and they bring out their old cider presses. So just this fantastic old fashioned. This is in the 1990s, but it was like the 1890s. We're pressing apple cider, and one of the other volunteers who came was this girl that I caught my eye, and I kept my eyes on her for many years, and now she's been my wife of 24 years. So we didn't meet in a bar. We met at a service project, and she is the most service-oriented individual I've ever known, and maybe I am sort of in that realm too. And so I fully agree with you. Put yourself in a good position, volunteer, and you'll meet quality people that maybe give you a shot of having those quality relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I've talked to a couple young people recently who are kind of in that 20s range, and they've talked about this stuff. And I would say, I mean, anybody who knows me, I mean, I've made all the mistakes, in those areas, which is, why I've thought about it so much over the course of my life. Like, what could I have done better? But I think one of the things that is interesting is that, if you go out into your day and you're ready to be married, you're somebody who's going, I want to be married, I want to start a family, I want to have kids, and do all that stuff. If you go out every day with the goal of becoming married as the goal, you end up taking whoever shows up first who will agree to marry you, which is not a good way to do that. But like what you're talking about, and I think, this is something I was gonna say earlier. I thought about, but I mean, I don't know if I'm gonna embarrass you here, but
I'm hard to embarrass.
Well, I know about you and your family and your kids, and I have so much respect for what you guys have built as a group, and the environment that you have. And there's so many things that I've seen just by hearing and watching, and how your kids are, and you guys do such a great job. There's so many things I'd love to do more of, in my family. But yeah, I think when your goal is to go out like you and your wife, kind of how you met, your goal wasn't to go out and find a spouse. Your goal was to go out and try to be the best person that you could be in the areas that were most interesting to you, that most made you feel like you were productive, that gave you purpose.
Have fun being of service.
Yeah. And I think that's a giant thing missing. I mean, not to open a giant can of worms, but in the the government, how they do benevolence,
right?
It generally lacks accompanying purpose with the help. And again, to go back to some of the story that you just went over is probably my favorite story in the book. But it does illustrate that it's not enough to just give it's the give a man a fish or teach him how to fish thing. It's not enough to just give people the rent that they need, but if you can help them see themselves as valuable members of society, even if nobody else thinks it of them at the time. But that's a lot of what leadership is. And if you're a dad or a parent, a lot of what leading your kids is seeing things in them that they don't see in themselves yet, casting that vision. There's a Jewish tradition that I really love, where they call it the blessing. And so they'll have their kids at whatever the smallest age is, and they'll introduce them. Hey, this is my son, the lawyer. This is my son, the doctor. Right? And so cool. So they would just kind of and they would just introduce them that way, and it's not a big deal. But that's why so many of these kids grow up to be doctors and lawyers, and because their parents are giving them the blessing, they're casting a vision of who they see them as from an early age. And so I think the more we can believe in our kids, or any leadership position, but just talking about, about being parents, the more that we can cast the vision of who we believe our kids to be as we're paying attention to their uniqueness. I mean, all our kids are really different, even though they have a lot of things that they're the same in, but they have these really different personalities and really different gifts. And so, I always loved that kind of Jewish tradition so I try to do that with my kids. I try to accentuate the things that I see in them so that as that evidence kind of pops up in their life, like that's confirmation.
Yeah.
And they go, maybe I am that, maybe I am a leader, or maybe I am skilled in this thing, or maybe I am really compassionate, maybe these are the areas I should operate in. It's a super useful thing for whoever's being led in any organization, for the person who's the leader to come and see, to tell you what they see in you.
Yeah, cast
that gift of belief.
And my wife is so good at two things related to that. One is really observing our kids closely, listening to them, and putting those pieces together. And she's also so good at what is our goal? What is our purpose?
Yeah.
If there's a tense moment, I tend to maybe not respond the best to that. I kind of get worked up in the moment, and afterwards we'll talk, and she'll say, what's the bigger purpose? What is our goal here? Is it to win whatever this confrontation is? Because you can do that, but does that accomplish the broader purpose? And that's been a hard thing for me to learn. But one of the things I'm doing this summer for one of our kids who's home is a task list before he can play video games that day, rather than fighting over video games.
Right.
You don't have to do this list, but if you want to play video games, you do.
Yeah.
And one of the things is build, fix, or tear something apart. Because I'm very cerebral, and my boys tend to be as well. And so that hands-on knowledge, I think, is something that our schools aren't giving, and I haven't done as much. I'm trying to do more. And even after just a couple days of it, I'm already hearing my son say, well, tomorrow I'm going to, fix this thing on the chicken coop. So he's already looking for things to build and fix. And that's such a cool thing that I hadn't thought about coming out of it. It's like, okay, what am I going to think of today? And already he's thinking of it. And it's a cool thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really cool tip. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's important to get, just to get those. It's amazing what your kids will do if you just give them a little, like, hey, it's okay if you. I mean, I have a son who's kind of geared that way, and I always let him know, like, hey, I have a couple things always that are around that are already broken, so tear it apart. See if you can get if you can't get it back together. If you mess it up, it was broken already. Don't worry about it. Like giving them those things that they don't have to worry about. Well, what if I break this?
Yeah.
But, so he's getting this, building this confidence, I mean, I had the opportunity to do that with a lot of stuff growing up, and so I was really fortunate that way, and I was kind of geared that way as well. So, it's a, for me it was really valuable to be able to just kind of get turned loose on some things, and say, maybe you're going to suck at this, maybe you'll get it back together, maybe you'll break it more. I mean, but at least you'll have had the experience of just getting into it. And just, I think it helped with that, like we were talking about before, just the idea of permanence not really being a thing, that you can always, we can always get another one. What is broken can usually be fixed. Don't worry about it. It's not the end of anything. We're constantly, and we talk about this all the time too, just trying to figure out how do we give our kids opportunities to grow in those areas. I mean, our parents would just leave us out in the field or in the woods, and give us a task to do, and it's like, we'll see you later, and I'd just be like, I don't know what I'm doing, and they wouldn't explain anything, and it's just like, here, go figure it out. But now, so it was
lost that so much. It's
fairly terrifying as a young person, because you don't want to disappoint your parents and you don't want to get yelled at later for messing something up. But as an older guy now, I have my confidence in tackling challenges that I don't know how to take care of them initially is really, really high.
That's awesome.
Because I've run into so many things that I didn't have any idea what I was doing.
We've got to do that more.
I messed it up. Yeah. And so, it also, it takes away a lot of anxiety, I feel like.
Kids are so anxious. Well, are you familiar with the idea of the growth mindset? it's this idea, and I didn't know it until my wife told me about it about 10 years ago, this academic idea that a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset.
Yeah,
maybe
yeah, yeah, yeah.
maybe a lot of your listeners are familiar with this, but it blew my mind, and I'm still trying to internalize it and absorb it. But I always thought of myself, I either know how to do something and I'm good at it, or I don't know how to do it, I'm bad at it, and I'll never learn. To me, that was obvious. You're either good at something or you'll never learn it. And this idea that I'm not good at it yet, but that was yet, just adding that word was mind blowing for me. And so I've tried to work. My wife is very good at working with our kids on that, and just kind of starting. And it was, and I don't feel that I'm very good at that yet. But my oldest son said to me the other day, well, it was a couple months ago, that he admires how I can start something and kind of learn and get better at it. And that was an incredibly emotional thing for me to hear, because I never saw myself that way. And for him to, for my son, who I think is really good at learning and being very confident and trying to see that in me, was really, really cool.
Yeah.
And I just thought, okay, maybe I'm not blowing it too badly.
No, this is something if my kids watch this, they'll probably be rolling their eyes. But I say this stuff to them all the time, and it's because it meant a lot to me when somebody first told it to me. But, if you want to be great at something, first you have to be good. And in order to be good at it, you first have to be average. And to be average, you first have to be bad. And before you can be bad at something, you've got to be terrible at it. And before you're terrible at it, you've got to try.
I love that.
And so it's like this backwards, and then coupling that with, there's another quote, and I can't remember who all these quotes come from, but, what one person can do, any person could do. That there's, I think talent is highly overrated. A lot of people are really good at stuff because they spend a lot of time doing it. And once you kind of realize that there are not all these supermen running around, like anybody can write a good book. It just depends on how much time. You may be more or less talented, but you could write a good book if you put enough time into it. You can be adequate or good at something, maybe somebody else's professional level at it or whatever, but anybody can, be adequate at golf or a sport or whatever. You may never have the ceiling of some people, but anybody can approximate it well enough to enjoy it, I think. If you're willing to put the work into it. And I think, that idea of finding something that you like enough that you're willing to do all the things that aren't enjoyable, right? Like, that's what will make you successful in your field of endeavor, I think. If you go, well, I hear this from pro athletes all the time. I like playing on Sundays enough that I do all the working out and the dieting and the study and all that stuff all the rest of the time, because I love playing football on Sunday, or I love,
So can I add a different angle? And I fully agree, and I love the way you phrase that. As you said earlier, I have access to all the information in the world on the internet. I can look, and people are so darn good. Not only I'm looking at the person who's the best that's ever been at something, not just the person now. So I like music, so I look at a songwriter like Bob Dylan, and I think, I'm never going to be that good. And the ones who are great know they can never be that good. So what I decided 5 or 6, 7 years ago, sometimes I play music at different events, and I decided, if I'm ever asked to play music at an event, I'm going to write a song for that event. And it might be specific to that, or it might just be about something else. So actually, the song I wrote about George Washington was the first song I wrote with that in mind. And I decided I'm probably never going to be as good as whoever, Paul Simon or Bob Dylan, but I might be one of the best songwriters to ever write about Lewis County.
Right, yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And people look, and I just can never be as good as, Kobe Bryant or whatever. You know what? But you can have a really good time playing well with your friends on Saturday afternoons or something like that. So I've written a lot of songs, and they're about, and so if I thought about writing one for the podcast, so maybe if I ever come back, I will. But, I go to something, I played at a fundraiser for Farm Group last year, and I wrote a little song about their award winners. They were giving out their awards. So people in the room, and they were hearing a song written about them and their little farm and their thing. And people were just like, this is so great. And it wasn't the best song that's ever been written, but it was fun, and it was a neat thing for that. And it's forgotten. It's not one I'm going to play probably very often, but it was fun for me to do. It was a challenge for myself. They enjoyed it. It's great. So I would encourage people to follow that idea that you put forward, and maybe don't say, I've got to be the next, Taylor Swift, because she wasn't Taylor Swift when she started. She
Sure,
enjoyed it
yeah.
and she did it. And find people you can do it with. Write a song about your friend, or encourage your friend to come play basketball with you. My son and I went out and golfed this morning. It was his first time, my first time in 35 years. And it'll be fun for us to go out and play together because we'll both be at the same level to compete with
Yeah.
each other. So will it take us 10 strokes? Yeah. And it'll still be a great challenge to play together and fun.
Yeah. Yeah, just because you won't be the best who's ever lived at something doesn't mean it's not a worthwhile pursuit. And I think something that you said just now is really interesting. I think you know, it may not be the best song ever written, but it's certainly the best song ever written about that,
Yeah.
right? Like there's a lot of things that you will do in your life that I'll never even think about, or the circle I'm in, I won't cross paths with this event or thing or idea. And we all have these things in our lives where we're one of the only people who's ever going to come across that thing. And I think people severely underestimate their importance in the community and how
Yeah.
important all the things do. Even if,
Absolutely.
I was talking to somebody about this the other day that, just being, that I don't want to give away too much of the conversation just in the interest of privacy. But I mean, I've talked to, and this has actually happened to quite a few people that I've talked to. But they'll be lamenting that, like, oh, my marriage isn't where I want it to be, or I haven't done it as good. I haven't been the parent I wanted to
Right.
be, or I haven't
Yeah.
done well up until this point.
Yeah.
And and I was like, man, just the fact that you guys have stayed together and have kids and you're attempting to be better every day is so valuable, not just for your family, but for their kids, that will come next, for the community, at large, people building these things, struggling through all their foibles and flaws in their character and the upbringing that affects you your whole life, and you just never really quite get past it. And real people live in life trying to aim up as best that they can. That's so important. It is the secret sauce of the society in
Yeah.
a lot of ways. I mean, there's other things that I think are even more important, but those kinds of things are so important for a community. You don't have to kill it your whole life. If
And don't do it alone either. Him talking to you about that
Absolutely.
and finding out, just get in your own mode. And, I find a couple other guys to get together for a Bible study or something like that. But just be a support and don't be alone. And I had to, it's been a couple years, I had to call someone for something. And we ended up just having an hour-long conversation. And it was just great. And it was an
Yeah.
acquaintance of mine I hadn't talked with in years. I accidentally pocket dialed someone the other day, and I hung up immediately because I had no reason to call her. She's an acquaintance who lives in the other side of the United States. But of course, with these iPhones, you can call someone for a half second. Oh,
Yeah.
why'd they? So I thought about texting her. It was just a pocket dial disregard, but I didn't. And she called me back. I'm like, ugh. So I ended up talking to her for 15 minutes. We had a great conversation. It was just
Yeah.
very nice to reconnect. It was her birthday, and it was lovely. And we just need a lot more of that. I've started on Father's Day. I had some time, and I just started texting just every father on my list. I probably texted you because
Yeah,
I
did
started
get one.
alphabetically.
I was like, oh, hey.
And it was kind of random, a little weird. Why is Mittge texting me? But just like, you know what? I'm just going to do this. And it was fun.
Yeah.
And I got dozens of responses back, and it was great. Some of them were actually really cool and meaningful. And some of them were just fun. One guy, I just said, kind of a fatherhood thing. And he replied back, he's like, got 3 kids. They're all married and on their own insurance. So, achievement unlocked. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's a cool way to think about it. So, yeah, just do what you're saying and don't do it alone. People, if you're struggling, just maybe call up someone you haven't talked with in a while, and probably they'll be really glad you called, and it'll unlock something.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of reconciled relationships out there that just a call, I mean, people probably aren't as mad as you think they are. They're probably hoping you call.
Yeah, and
Like there's a lot of stuff like that. Yeah,
I made some mistakes, and I wanted you to know I'm sorry. It probably doesn't solve everything, but yeah, that can go a long way too.
yeah, humility, right? Just knowing, hey, yeah, no, That's a big deal. Well, yeah,
Did we cover it all?
we
Life, the universe, and everything?
we definitely did not, but it feels like a good place to stop, doesn't it?
I think so. I did want to say this book, if you liked it, you've been looking at the cover. The cover is done by none other than Micah Hansen, who is our ace sound guy today. So again, community comes together and we make great things when we
Yeah, yeah,
support each other.
absolutely. Now, did he get a Father's Day text?
I didn't get to H's, I don't think. Did I?
Oh.
Did I text you for Father's Day? No comment over there?
I told him about it, and he's like, I was like, I got this text from Brian. He's like, how come
Mike is also my brother-in-law, so yeah, I didn't do. It was not an ascending order of awesomeness because you'd be toward the top, but he would be at the very top.
Yeah.
Very quality individual you've got in your little group of podcasters.
Oh
here.
man, I mean, just yeah, what a cool thing that we can even do it, you know.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about doing stuff together, I've been thinking about this a lot, and it's something that I'm hoping to work on. As men in our culture, we're notoriously terrible at, we're very good at isolating ourselves,
man.
especially
It
in
just
this,
gets bad at this
especially
age. I
at
don't know
this
what the
age.
problem is.
Absolutely, I think people get really, and so I actually read a study recently that men at our, the age group that we're at, report their lowest level of, being happy or fulfilled. And there's a myriad of reasons why we won't, belabor the point. But yeah, I think a big thing that we just, culturally we got to get better at is just going, and I find this, I'll ramble forever, but there's so many things that interweave into this. I think one of the things that I think is good for my marriage is that I don't expect my wife to be my best friend all the time.
Yeah, you got to have friends and bigger than that.
It takes a ton of pressure off of that because, I don't know if this is surprising to people or not, but like naturally I'm very introverted. Like I don't really want to talk to, talking to a stranger is very intimidating for me. I've developed the skill and I've come to enjoy it more because I've developed the skills necessary to not make it horrible for either one of us. Yeah, my tendency is to go, well, I only want to hang out with my wife and kids anyway, but then that puts an incredible amount of pressure on them because they may not always, they may have stuff going on or whatever. And I think one thing that's been really, I've realized about myself is, if I don't want to be frustrated about not being as close all the time that I would like to be in that relationship, I should probably have, and it should be directed in the right place with other like married guys, who are in that same period of life. And it's been a what seems like a small change, but it's been really good. The ripple effect has been really interesting. And I don't know, if anybody else, I'm assuming most things that we deal with, everybody's dealing with. But that's something I've changed recently, and I feel like it's really, really helped. And this is just kind of one of the outpourings of that. It was just something we all wanted to do and felt like there was a space for it, and hopefully it can be a service to the area where people can get to know stuff more than if it wasn't around, and so hopefully we can do that for people. And it's, if not, it's cheap melatonin. You just plug it in and
puts people right to
you
sleep.
can go to bed and sleep easy. But
yeah, well, thanks for
hey,
having
man,
me on. This is a pleasure.
I really appreciate having you on. Where can people get the book again?
Yeah, so Book and Brush Bookstore in downtown Chehalis, or the Lewis County Historical Museum, or the Centralia Downtown Association has a George Washington Museum in Centralia, right there on Tower Avenue. Or just, email me. We've got an email address. It's ourgeorgewashington@gmail.com. Or just find me. I'm around.
Yeah. Well, and, maybe audiobook coming soon.
Narrated by JAlves himself.
Well, we'll probably need somebody with actually a good voice. But, yeah, no, I would love to see that story, get wider penetration and have more people be able to get familiar with it. I think it's an awesome story, and I'm really glad that you took the time and the risk involved in putting it out there. So
it's cool to be part of, helping tell the story, because you're right, it's a good story. So thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right.
See ya. Goodbye, everybody.
Cool.
How was that? How long was that?
2:10.
What? Holy
Crazy,
heck.
right?
That beat even the
I mean,
record.
we could talk for another.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so
You got to
many.
have a clock or something so that
Yeah, we should have a talk.
Well, I kind of like that there's not
no,
because
just talk until it feels
I
right.